Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever stared completely blankly at a massive wall of someone else's code, just trying to figure out where on earth to begin, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're officially moving past that dread. We're going to master a highly efficient, structural way to actually read code.
Okay, let's dive into this, because for so many of us, code review just feels like a chaotic slog, doesn't it? You open up this massive pull request, you start scrolling through endless lines of syntax, and you're basically just hoping a bug magically jumps out at you before you give it the rubber stamp. Well, we're shifting away from that chaos today. We are turning code reading into a highly strategic, calculated process.
Because honestly, the core difference in becoming an efficient reviewer, it all comes down to intention. We've all felt the pain of jumping around randomly in a code base, right? You see a variable definition over here, a loop over there, and you literally burn energy trying to mentally stitch the whole thing together. To understand code effectively, you absolutely must learn to review in one very specific top-down order. The random scrolling ends right now.
So here is that exact 5-step roadmap. Number 1, project purpose. 2, architecture. 3, changed files. 4, functions, and finally, 5, edge cases. Now this isn't just a basic checklist, it's a macro to micro funnel. Every single step deliberately unlocks the vital context for the one that follows. You can't skip ahead, and you really can't reverse the flow.
All right, we start our journey right here with the macro view. Imagine you're in an airplane cruising at 30,000 feet. Before you ever look at a single bracket or a semicolon or a logic loop, you have to understand the vast landscape below you. The absolute biggest mistake you can make in a code review is putting your nose directly against the tree bark before you even realize you're standing in the wrong forest entirely.
So, it all starts with the project purpose. This is the overarching goal, the fundamental reason the codebase even exists in the first place. And listen, this step is strictly non-negotiable. If you don't understand the why of the project, judging the how of the code is effectively impossible.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Once you have that purpose totally locked in, we move to architecture, the structural blueprint supporting that goal. Knowing the purpose naturally leads you right here. How is the project organized to actually deliver on its objective? Understanding this blueprint is the absolute structural foundation of your entire review.
Okay, now we're dropping altitude. We're moving from that giant 30,000-foot conceptual cloud down to a much closer bird's-eye view. And notice, we had to establish the project purpose and the architecture first. Why? Well, because only now do those high-level frameworks give us the correct lens we need to finally look at the specific modifications being proposed.
Which brings us to the changed files, the specific documents modified within that architecture. When you guide your focus here, after looking at the blueprint, it feels entirely different. You aren't just reading a random file name anymore, you're seeing exactly where this new piece of the puzzle fits into the whole shebang.
All right, let's keep descending right down to the ground floor. This is the micro view. We're zooming past the level of entire files and getting right down to the actual mechanical parts doing the heavy lifting. We've got the context, we've got the location, and now we examine the mechanics.
Functions. These are the specific ground-level operational blocks within those changed files. And reviewing functions only comes fourth in our sequence because of one simple, undeniable truth. You can only judge a function's true effectiveness if you already know the file and the architecture that it lives inside. A perfectly written function that breaks the overarching architecture, yeah, that's still a bad change.
And finally, we transition to the last step of the reading process, where we pull out the magnifying glass. This is where we hunt for the absolute finest details. We've seen the forest, we've seen the trees, we've seen the leaves. Now, we are critically scrutinizing the very edges of those leaves to make sure they hold up under pressure.
So the crucial point is, this is where we hunt for edge cases, those extreme boundaries and completely unexpected inputs. Maybe it's a negative number or a null value. You literally cannot anticipate these curveballs if you don't fully grasp what the function is supposed to do and how it serves the broader architecture.
Okay, so you know the theory now. You've got the 5-step funnel. But, theory is kind of useless without execution, right? The source material doesn't just leave us hanging with a list, it gives us the ultimate practice challenge. This is a practical, rigorous gauntlet laid out specifically to test your discipline and your mastery of this new top-down reading method.
Your challenge begins right here. I want you to find a completely new project, something you have never laid eyes on before, consisting of at least 100 lines of code. This needs to be completely fresh territory, so you're forced to rely entirely on the funnel, starting at the purpose and diligently working your way down step by step.
Or, if you really want to push the limits even further, aim for 200 lines of code. This is where you truly test your newly learned top-down reading stamina. It's enough code to have a distinct architecture and distinct functions, but still contained enough to thoroughly evaluate in a single focused session.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the twist. You absolutely must do all of this strictly without running the code. Zero execution. No way. You cannot rely on a compiler or a runtime environment to tell you what the code does. Your brain, guided by our 5 steps, is literally the only compiler allowed in this test.
Which brings us to our final lingering thought for today. Can you trust your review process enough to leave the compiler behind? It's definitely a daunting prospect for sure, but it is the truest measure of your comprehension. I challenge you to take on that 100 to 200 line gauntlet today. Master the macro to micro funnel and see just how razor-sharp your reviews can become. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy reviewing!